welcome to Set Life. I am Jake Friels, and this is
Amber Buto.
And we're so glad that you're here. We have a great friend with us, Layne Laughter. So glad that you've joined us today. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I just have to say, before we started rolling, like we were really trying to figure out your last name because it looks like laughter. I really think that's so cool, actually.
Yeah.
And that you're in animation. We're going to get to that. But yeah, what a brilliant name.
What a brilliant name. You should do that.
I picked it out.
Is the moment you were like, Mom, Dad, listen, we should really capitalize on this.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, let's just jump into your story. It's so fascinating. Number one, our stories have overlapped each other for a decade at least, and working in the same industry together, but also seeing how your path to this industry is just amazing. And so I just would love to hear, where did this begin for you? How did you find out that you love to be in this?
Yeah, I mean, it really started for me pretty early on. Actually, I remember being probably 9-10 years old, and that was about when, computers were becoming more accessible back in the 90s, and I was doing PowerPoint animations. I'd take little clip art, and I was like, breaking them apart and like doing slides and like advancing the slides and doing little animations. So that's kind of some of the earliest times when I was like, this seems fun. And then when I got into high school, my school had 3D animation in their drafting class back then, and I felt like I was pretty good at it. I really enjoyed it. I won some awards while I was there. So that was where I was going to go and advance my career is what I wanted to do. But talking to the art institutes of the world and stuff like that, they're like, well, how well can you draw? And I said, I can't. So the way that their curriculum was based was that you had to be able to draw really well to get through their classes.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's interesting.
And so otherwise it would have taken me like a decade probably to finish. And so I was like kind of looking at what else was out there, and I kind of looked into graphic design, and that really didn't fit me. And so then I kind of transitioned to, let's look into video. And so I got into video and video editing specifically. Early days of Final Cut Pro back in the day.
Yeah.
And, my first job was out at Kingwood College. When I was still in college, I'd come home and they had a TV station out there and would do summers working out there. So that's kind of where it all started and morphed into that video world. But from an early age, I really felt like that's where animation wanted to be. So it's just kind of cool that God's brought me 360 degrees, 20 plus years later, and I'm getting to do it now. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's how we always talk on the show a lot of times is it's not the conventional way. It's not the way that everybody else thinks. You go to school, like that was the route you were trying to take, but it's cool to see how you ended up there. And when you get in later to your story of riding in the back seat of jets, it's you're like, how in the world did you get there? But it's cool to see the process, and the biggest thing is what your yes can take you to, and so track us on to the next kind of phases. I even know you even got into doing work for churches as well and helping produce, and some of the biggest churches even here in Texas that you got a part of as well and we're working with. So what was that like?
Yeah, so I married my sweetheart, high school sweetheart, when I was 22. She was 21. She was still in college. I had just graduated, and I remember we didn't have a place to live, didn't have a job, full-time job. I was, selling cell phones in Costco kind of thing. And but we just kind of trusted that this was, what God wanted us to do. And so a month before we were planning to get married, my parents were like, hey, do you want to we buy a lake house. Do you want to live there? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me think. Yes.
Yep.
So God provided that for us. And then a week after we got back from our honeymoon, I had an interview with Church in the Woodlands and started that next week with a large church in the Woodlands. And it gave me extremely, as a 22-year-old jumping into that world. And I can't imagine any other place being thrown into the fire and having to learn and the things that I got to do there and experience, and was
all that
really amazing.
Yeah, all that experience you gain by just getting to do it.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things about this industry. It's hard to find a place where you can do it daily.
Yeah.
It's not like a project, but it's something that you wake up and do every single day.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool to hear another story here on Set Life where you see the thread of creativity from a young age.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's, as a society, I hope we do better at encouraging and fostering creativity at a young age.
Sure.
Because I think it's a gift given, and it takes time to cultivate, just like if you were going to play a sport or anything else like that, you know, even business or certain things younger in kids. So I think it's great your school had programs for you to even find that you had a passion for that.
For sure.
You know, because in what you do, it takes technology, and man, where technology is today,
Yep.
and the kids today that are getting to play around with their phones with animation, with photography, with videography, with all of that, you know, is really great. And then to land in a church, which we hear that a lot also on the show, that a lot of people are able to start through the church in their media departments. I think it's just kind of cool to watch and get to hear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, the the time that I was starting to get into video was, you know, early on in nonlinear editing days. And I often tell myself, I don't think I would have been on the same path if it had been possibly 3 or 4 years earlier, because computers weren't as involved in the process. And that's kind of where I was really wanting to focus on. So it's also kind of neat to see the timing and how that worked out.
Yeah. And I think a little bit, you know, what we were talking about even last night was the unrealistic expectation of the editing process. You know, I mean, he would have people bring things to him that are outlandish, amazing, creative, over the top projects. And they're like, oh, and we need that in 3 days.
Right.
You know, and speak through that a little bit. How did you process that with teams, and especially executives that have no real clue sometimes, the editing process, the creativity process of what it takes to bring an idea to life, you know? And how did you kind of work through some of that? You know, I know there's people that watch this who are going, I'm so frustrated all the time because people are giving me unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we did as a team was focused on kind of behind the scenes, focused on the pyramid of good, fast, and cheap that, you know, is so often talked about. And it rings so true in the production world, especially just because there is these expectations to perform, but when you do it fast and you do it on the cheap, it's just not going to get to that excellent phase that you need. And so that's what we were constantly battling, was that, yes, if you want us to do it in this timeline, you're either going to have to fork over a lot of money to make sure we have the right equipment in place that, you know, we can grab and go. We don't have to, you know, bring it in and all that, or, you know, you just need to be okay with a good product. And so that's unfortunately a lot of times where the church lands is, you know, well, we don't have the dollars, but so we're just going to be okay with good. And
Which, in my opinion, is understanding the production process.
Absolutely.
And understanding pre-production. Productions are only as good as pre-production.
Absolutely.
And even the young kids, we have a lot of interns that come here to the studio and stuff like that. I can't tell you how much I harp on the fact of pre-production. If you can think through every aspect of that production beforehand, and because it's, you know, putting out fires, so they say production all day long is all you're doing is looking to put out fires, you know, and you really don't want it to get to the fire state. You just want to look for smoke, that it's not actually a fire. But if you can think through that prior to, you already have a solution to that smoke. You know, you've already thought through a lot of that. You've given time for it. You know it. So I think that's where there's a bit of a disconnect at the executive level versus the creative level, just not having a full understanding of the creative process and how we convey that. It's just difficult to do.
And I think a lot of times the executives or the producers or the directors, they feel like they want to, you know, figure it all out up front, and then they come to you and just say, okay, you need to be here at this time, and this is, you know, with this camera or whatever, and you don't have any idea what the plan is. And so when they show up, you're just kind of like trying to figure it out on the fly. And that's where most of our issues came into play, was like, oh, you want to do what? Okay, you know, like, we didn't know this, so we're just gonna make the best we can. So.
I've got the wrong lens. I don't have enough batteries. You know, I mean, the stuff that matters that you can't get the shot, and then it's a great idea, and you have a subpar shot, and
Yeah.
that's frustrating, you know,
Yeah.
and it can be in this world. So,
Yeah. I was going to say, okay, so we've had the privilege of getting to learn about you. And one of the things I've been so excited. Okay, first of all, animation's super cool to me because we haven't had anybody on that's been in animation. And I'm super stoked to hear about all your animation. But before we jump off into full animation land, let's talk about this really cool opportunity that you had that, you know, you were telling us you went to the church and you were started that career, but then you got this opportunity to sit in the back seat of an F-18 for like over 200 hours being a videographer for, was it Lockheed Martin?
Lockheed Martin, yep.
And okay, tell us about that. This is so exciting for me.
So yeah, it was, I had just crossed paths with a guy. I worked for a small startup for like less than a year. And so one of my friends that I made there, he actually got a job at Lockheed's plant in Fort Worth. And I didn't even know they had a media team. So I thought that was cool. And, you know, they're in Fort Worth at the plant. They just do a lot of documenting of the jet being built and corporate videos and stuff like that. But he was telling me that the F-35, so it's the latest 5th gen fighter, and when I started with Lockheed, it was in the very early stages of testing, and so every jet has to go through flight test phase, and so most people don't understand. I mean, it takes years and years to test these jets because, you know, the best way I describe it as they take off with, say, a bomb on the right wing, and they have to fly at 10,000 feet and make sure that everything works, and then they go up to 20,000 feet with that same bomb, and then they could put a bomb on the other wing, and then they do those things again. And so it's this methodical testing. They have to clear the flight envelope for everything. So it's a huge ordeal with, you know, hundreds of people on the test site team. And so anyways, I was working at the church I actually grew up in Houston area, and I actually applied for it, and my resume got kicked out from the system because I didn't have any, like the term HD, you know, high definition on my resume. And so their big system kicked me out. So luckily my buddy gave my resume to his boss and the hiring manager. And next thing you know, I've never met anybody at the company, and they're flying me to Maryland to do an interview on location at the Naval Air Base that I'd be working for.
Wow.
I spend, you know, half a day there and talk with, you know, 2 of the different bosses. And then a week later, I fly home. I flew home that next day. A week later, they called me and said that, yeah, we want you to be the guy. And so then a couple months later, I'm sitting in the back seat of an F-18.
Oh my gosh.
And so my job was flight test. They always have a safety chase. So it's an older aircraft that's been through all the testing that goes up with F-35 and just make sure that everything's working well. If they do a test point and something's wrong, then that jet can come and check it out, or so just a safety there. And so if there was not all F-18s are 2-seaters, so if there was a back seat open, then they'd put us in there, or there were certain missions that had to have a videographer or photographer on. So yeah, I'd go up and with some of the best fighter pilots in the world, and we would chase the F-35 around doing testing. I'm in the full Top Gun gear, you know, 30 pounds of survival gear sitting there on me, and did some pretty cool stuff. I mean, it was, as cool as that was, one of the most surreal moments for me was part of our job was also taking pictures of the F-35 inner workings in case something was, you know, there maintenance on it, so they'd make us take a picture of this part that's broken or something like that. And so like the first time I'm walking on top of a F-35 stealth fighter jet taking photos was just very surreal to me. And yeah, just going from, and a funny story was actually right before I left the church I was working at, one of the guys, he was a younger guy that just came on staff, had never seen Top Gun.
Oh.
And my team knew nothing about my conversations with Lockheed or whatnot. And like a week before I'm going to interview, we decided at lunch to pop in Top Gun at church one day, and we were watching it at lunch. And I'm thinking, holy cow, this is going to be my life like in a couple of weeks. So, but yeah, and then I got another great opportunity to, the F-35 is one jet for all 3 services. So you have the Air Force has a version, the Marine Corps has a version, and the Navy has a version. So the Marine Corps version and the Navy version is what we were testing. So those both land on aircraft carriers.
Wow.
And the Marine Corps version actually can land vertically. It can sit completely still in the air and then land vertically onto the aircraft carrier. And so I got to go out on an aircraft carrier for 3 weeks and document the landings and takings off of the jet. And one of the coolest things was I got to take a big old, a tripod with a slider on it onto the deck of an aircraft carrier. And so I got permission to go into the middle. So I was right behind the person kind of directing the jet down. And as the jet was lowering, I've got a nice slider shot moving and panning. And when I brought that back from the ship, the whole team like just went nuts, and that was used in just about every video they made for a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you not think, okay, they're going to be making another Top Gun. I should apply to be a cinematographer on that deal at some point?
I have no idea how they got some of those shots. I mean, a lot of it I think was done from an airplane that's specifically designed for that. But we were, and then they also allowed GoPros and stuff in there, and we weren't. Yeah. They're using more of that in the F-35 now that there's hundreds of them built or whatnot. But I mean, we're up there with. I mean, you have about this much space, and you've got your cameras on this side, and you're strapped in with a huge harness. So like trying to turn is almost impossible, and trying to hold the camera, and you start pulling any G's, that camera starts to weigh down. And probably one of the hardest shoots I did was they do fuel dump testing in case of emergency, and they have to dump fuel, and you always have to have a cameraman for that. But they wanted to do fuel dump testing on 4G turns.
Oh my gosh.
So I actually was using a red camera because they wanted it in high speed. So I was shooting at 200 frames per second of this fuel dump, trying to hold a red in the backseat of a jet with 4Gs pulling on me. And we would do a turn and then level off, and then we do another turn and level off. So.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
But
that's when you're like, squeeze,
yes,
breathe, squeeze, breathe,
Well, and it's so ironic because I knew nothing about airplanes. I couldn't tell you the difference between an F-18 or an F-16 or what landed on a boat or didn't. And, somebody told me that I'd be wearing what they call a G suit, and I was like, what is that? And it's, these pants you put on over your flight suit, and it's hooked to an air tube. And when you start to pull G's, the jet, recognizes that, and it pumps air into these pants that squeeze your legs and your body to keep your blood flow.
Keep your blood up. Wow.
And that was actually, it could get pretty painful. You start getting up to 4 or 5 G's, and you're like, okay, you can stop squeezing now.
And get the shot.
That's right.
Yeah. And you're thinking, stop squeezing, get the shot.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, again, another story here of where Cameron can take you.
Exactly.
Right? Like the opportunities that a camera provide, that we've heard. I mean, you're in animation now, but, behind the camera, a lot of people, if you have a lot of the different gifts that come through here, all love the camera aspect of creating. Yeah. It's just really cool to hear how it's taking you into an opportunity that you...
there's probably just literally less than 100 people that have not been in the military and have gotten the
sit where you got to sit.
Yeah.
Man, that's
Super
such a cool story on how that comes about. And then it's that moment. You're surreal. You're in the jet. You're filming. You're the guy. And I thought
the first time I took off in the jet, I was like, this seems fairly normal, and so we're leveling off, and then all of a sudden my pilot just whipped the jet to the side. I was like, what? Okay, this is not the same as your normal 737.
As your face is against things.
Right.
Yeah. That was the same the first time I was strapped to a helicopter, hanging out of a helicopter, filming. And
I was going to say, please say that you were filming, you were not dangling from a helicopter.
This time that he was filming.
Yeah, I was filming, and then he's like, okay, we're gonna go into a stall. I'm like, we're in a helicopter. Right. We don't stall helicopters, and literally stalls the helicopter. We go straight up, and it starts going down backwards, and it's not the propellers aren't going, and I'm like, this is not good, and it turns and goes like this, and we're doing 140 miles an hour going straight at the ground, and kicks it back on, and what? And you're
Yeah.
just like, the blood's rushing out of you. You know, you're squeezing down. So, I mean, I could only imagine what a jet would be like. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Occasionally, when the F-35 would start up, they would have an issue and they couldn't go fly. And so every once in a while, my pilot would need to go up and get some time in the just flying, because you have to get a certain amount of time each month. And so we'd go up and we'd do some cloud surfing, and they'd let me, get on the stick a little bit. And one of my favorite things, they said, all right, point the nose straight up and, just give it a lot of gas. So we took the jet all the way up until basically, without going into afterburner, it wouldn't go any higher. And then he said, all right, push on the left throttle or left pedal a little. And we just start falling. And the jet just kind of does this motion, and then all of a sudden we're, diving straight down. And he's like, all right, just pull back on the stick now and you'll level off. And
you're flying a jet.
Yeah.
I mean, you're flying a jet, it's like, God, how cool is that, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's just cool.
Big fun.
So you jump out of a jet, okay, not literally jumped out of the jet, but you jump out of filming in jets and you take the big risk and you jump off into your own world and your own production of filming and editing and everything and animation and all. So, I mean, track us into that. I mean, how do you now, just go, all right, it's time to take the leap. It's time to do what I feel like is in me to bring to the world.
Yeah, so my time in Maryland, doing the fighter jet was amazing, but from a career standpoint, I knew that it was, temporary, and so I was trying to think of what was next. And so I never really had aspirations to go back to school, but I don't know, something in me was like, gave me a nudge of, why don't you look at this? And so I started looking into things, and I was like, you know what, this seems interesting. So I signed up for a master's degree course at West Virginia University online, and that kind of led me towards a path of doing more writing and marketing and building these brand guidelines and all that kind of fun stuff. And so I did enjoy that. And so I got a job at Fort Worth Lockheed plant within the communications team. And I was, again, it's just a total God thing. I went from, flying in the backseat of a jet to doing writing for the general manager of the F-35. So he was the guy in charge of it, and I was going to be supporting him. And I've never done anything like that before. And so it was definitely jumping in the fire of that. But I quickly realized that the corporate world was not for me. And I feel like the saying around there is, that they live to work. And, I work to live. I like my job, but I also love my family and have other aspirations besides the job.
Yeah.
So I was applying for places left and right, and getting interviews, and just nothing was happening. And so a friend of mine at church, he is the original creator of a faith-based kids show called Owlegories. And he was like, hey, I've got this new idea. It's this new software that Adobe just came out with that's similar to video editing in some ways. I think you could pick it up probably pretty easily. And what do you think about helping me part-time? And I've got all these new shows that I want to do. And I was like, shoot, let's just go for it. And so he said that he's got plenty of content to help start me off in creating. And so I looked at the software, I did some tutorials, and I kind of learned it, and decided to, give it a try. Yeah. And so I put in my 2 weeks notice at Lockheed and started down a new adventure about 5 years ago. So
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's crazy. The first word that comes to mind is adaptability.
Oh yeah.
Can you adapt?
Same.
Can you change with the times? Can you take on risk, and jump and take the leap, I mean, and we were talking last night. I mean, some of the stuff you've written was trending #1 across all of every Lockheed Martin, not just in Fort Worth, but across the entire United States. And it's just one of those things where you get to see what you love, what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and now, looking at, the world you're looking at now of going, we're about to do 96 episodes of a show and building the entire framework. And we were talking about that last night. And you go from, something that you think you should do to now this is a full-time career. And now you're really being successful on so many different levels over the years as well,
Sure.
And one of the things that I think is maybe a misconception of really how much it takes to do animation. Like that's a really strenuous process to do animation and develop a whole anime series. I didn't know much about it, and then actually got to meet the guys that you're working with, and sit and visit with them and see a lot of their visions and boards and some of their pilots and stuff of the things that you're creating, and just how much it takes to get a product that we see on TV in animation. It made me have a new respect for all of the major animes that are put out, at feature levels and all of that.
Well, what's been really cool is kind of where I kind of started almost pioneering a new type of animation. So Adobe released a software I think it's been about 6 or 7 years ago, called Adobe Character Animator. And there's two kind of animation styles that you're seeing a lot. It's either the hand-drawn, where you're literally drawing every frame, you're drawing all the in-betweens and all that, and that's the extremely time-consuming, things. And then there's also puppet animation. So you can create a puppet that you give it a bone structure and you give it all the different art assets you need. And then you're able to manipulate it within the software to make it do whatever you want it to do. So that's what I do, is I do the puppet animation, because again, I still can't draw worth anything. And the software that Adobe has created, it has its limitations, but if you work within those limitations and just tell a good story and know how to use it, we're finding that we can do it much faster, much cheaper, and still being able to, make it look really good. And for the faith-based world especially, that's, in my opinion, going to be game changer. And that's what we're seeing. It's like you come at them with a hand-drawn, this is how much it's going to cost per minute, and they just are blown away. And it's like, holy cow. But when we come in at something that is, sometimes a quarter of that, and we're still able to produce it at a fairly high level, and it's, I wouldn't say that it's that old adage of, good, fast, and cheap. It's a whole new ball game with this type of stuff. And so being able to use the tools the way that they were built to, you can still create a good quality product and that was the purpose behind it, not because you had to settle, but because that's what we, went out and set out to do.
And it's new. So, in film and television, they're always looking for the next big thing, right? And nobody knows what that is. Everybody tries to predict what it's going to be, but there's trends and trajectories that they try to do. But what's the next generation going to see as cool and edgy and fun and want to watch? And what do they have now that they're watching? So maybe it's seemingly good to the market now, but what if that becomes the new wow?
Sure.
That's the crazy thing about art, and it's the crazy thing about this industry.
Well, and especially in the kids content specifically, is the Christian market is way, way, way behind because of generally the cost of it and the getting the good writing that it really requires. And so part of it too is, with the original show I started with, Owlegories, is we're creating content, a lot of content, very fast. I mean, in the past 5 years, I was adding up how much content I've created for that show, and it's upwards of close to 10 hours worth of content that we're able to create in a fairly short amount of time. And that's just literally with a 5-person team that we have. And so now we're so the story about how I got connected to Brandon and Brainy Pixel is another God moment of just I was looking for more business, and I reached out to this guy on LinkedIn that said he's got this new show. If you want to be involved, message me. I was like, okay, sure, why not? And then next thing you know, he's like, hey, I'm going to be on this video call with these guys. I'd love for you to join. And so it was, Brandon, and was trying to help him. And so fast forward a couple weeks, and he's kind of, moved a little bit out of the picture. And Brandon and I are like, all right, how can we continue this relationship? And so since last August, we've finished 20 episodes for Yippee on a new show that helps girls, mainly girls, learn Bible verses. And My daughter got to do the voice for the character.
Oh, how
That's
great.
They said it's, doing pretty well. People are watching it multiple times because it's, a memory verse
Yeah,
show.
for
So,
sure.
and it's interactive. So she's pretending like she's doing a live stream. And so she's like, repeat after me. And like, then little bubbles are popping up saying, they have a question. So she looks at the question and then answers the question. And so it's kind of that YouTube feel to it that kids
Yeah.
are
Oh,
into.
yeah.
So that's
Yep.
kind of the
Yeah.
adapting to
Yeah, it's
what
awesome.
they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Brandon at Brainy Pixel has just done a great job of networking and going to these
Yep.
different shows. And he's a big Answers in Genesis fanboy, he'll tell you. And if you're not familiar with them, they're the ones that have the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum up in Kentucky.
Yep.
And so they emailed him out of the blue and said, "Hey, we want to start a new show. How much would it be for 96 episodes of this new animated show that we want to do?" And so
Wow.
we worked through the process, and that was back in January. And we just finished the pilot a couple months ago, and we are pretty much ready to roll on season 1 of a new show on Answers in Genesis called Lily's Lab.
Oh, how
And
cool.
Awesome.
so they have these books called Answers for Kids, and so they take Bible questions, and probably one of my favorite ones is, did Adam and Eve have a belly button?
Yep.
And
That's
so
my favorite riddle of all time. My favorite riddle.
Yeah.
so they take questions like that and go mainly in Genesis and the Old Testament of back when creation was happening is where they focus a lot. And so she's just in her treehouse lab answering questions, and
How cool.
That's awesome.
so we're hopeful that it'll be a good partnership for the next 4 or 5 years to create hours of good content that kids can
Yep.
consume. And the budget is great for them because they know how much animation costs. So when we come in at the prices that we're coming in at, they're like, yeah, let's do it. And then we're putting enough profit margin in where we can do really well with it and hopefully fund even more content and things like that. And so it's a great deal for both parties. And
Yeah.
that's where we're seeing that this could really take off and help the market in the faith-based content.
So you said something last night. You said the power of your yes.
Oh, I was so going there. He wrote it in his thing too. I was going to say, I have to say one of the lines that he said.
Yep.
The power of putting your yes on the table
Yeah.
and seeing what God does with the yes.
Yeah. It's
I mean, and just, again, if you look at everything that I just said, you can't draw a line anywhere and match any of that stuff
Right.
up.
right.
And so it's, I've, putting your yes out there and how many no's that I got back so many times. I mean, it was hard. I mean, there was definitely those times when it's like, all right, I said yes, and now, I'm getting a no that is, at the moment you feel like it's just heartbreaking. And
Yeah.
you're like, well, why did I do all this? And so, and then seeing, 6 months later, we're, sitting at the table with guys at Answers in Genesis and doing something that I never thought of, possible. And it, if he had said yes to that other thing, I don't know if that would have happened. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what scripture comes to my mind is God delights in giving us the desires of our heart.
Yeah. Psalms 37.
It's being able to, from what you were saying, 9, 10 years old, getting to work in animation, and we won't say your age if you don't want us to. Now, a few years later, through fighter jets, odds and end jobs. We talked about governing elephants, literally. A bunch of other things that you've done to ultimately, in this time and space where you are now, giving the desires of your heart to create animation to help change and win the hearts of the youth.
Yeah.
It's just it's inspiring. It's encouraging. I hope if you're watching that you're inspired and encouraged to know that
Yeah.
if you're not doing it now, doesn't mean you're not going to do it. Just means stay the course.
Yep.
Stay the course that, eventually you will get there if you just don't give up in your creative gift and talent, but be able to pivot within that and keep pursuing it, keep refining all aspects of it. I'm sure what you learned at the churches that you worked at, and I'm sure what you learned sitting in the back seat of a jet and being ingenuitive and those things all help you do what you do today and give you the, even if it's being able to sit at the opportunity with the Gen corporation, that you were able to go, okay, this isn't too big for me. Like I'm not like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I should say yes to this.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I've already said yes to flying in the back of jets and I made it. So we can do this, you know, kind of.
Well, and the Answers in Genesis project was absolutely a yes to an unknown, because, as with technology, there's things that you think that you can do with it, but until you're given that opportunity, you don't actually know if it's going to work right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was it's like we were given kind of the ability to push the boundaries of what I could do, creatively and technically with this.
Wow.
And we were able to accomplish it and blow the client away. And so it was, so that was definitely a like, we'll see,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
but one of the things that I was telling Jake was just that I've never been, a guy that's going to go out and, preach a great message or win a lot of people personally one-on-one. That's just not my personality. But the ability to use my gifts and my talents to speak to literally millions of people throughout the years that's kind of where I see my place in all of this. And I see that, the whole saying of who did you bring with you when you, stand in heaven? It's like, well, I mean, there's a few people out there that I personally will be bringing, but, the crowd that's going to be behind me because of the part that I had in it is going to be much bigger.
Yeah.
And I think creatives in this industry can sometimes lose sight of that. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so good. What would you say to somebody? What would you say to your younger self that was the little boy back there was like, "Ooh, I think I like this, creating this, anime." And then I know at some point in your life you had to have a lot of people that probably told you can't make money with that. You can't do that. Like, you get a real job.
Yeah.
I hear that so often in this world.
Yeah.
What advice would you give?
And I think it is just the have confidence in yourself. It's I think that was a big thing for me early on, was that because of limitations, I never felt like my stuff was as good as such and such person, but their circumstances were completely different than mine. And so it's just doing the best that you can with what you have and knowing where you fit in the world. And I'm not going to go out and direct the next episode of a TV show, but if I can sit behind the editor, or if I can make one of the characters and do it to the best that I can, then that's all that God calls of me. And so just having that confidence throughout my career is probably the one thing that I wish I would have had more at a younger age, and knowing that that I'm doing this and I'm doing it well. So
Yeah.
but I had a good support system. My parents never once said, why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. They were,
Oh, that's so great.
yeah, they've always been my best cheerleader, and I can't imagine being where I am today without them and my family and stuff. So
That's really good.
That's huge.
Yeah,
it
it
always
is.
is. Support system in this industry it's either you have it a lot or you have none.
Yeah.
It's
true.
there's hardly any middle ground like that.
But both make it.
100%.
But both make it. And I think what
100%.
you said is why. I think you have to believe in yourself at some point that the gifts you were given are good enough, and that you can always grow. And you can't put limitations on your gift because of your opportunity. You have to be able to go, okay, so this is what I have now. One of the things you said that was so brilliant is, I am going to do my very best with what I have right here. That is a recipe for success.
Yep.
That's what separates you from the rest, versus sitting there going, oh, I can't because I don't have the finances, or I wasn't given that opportunity, so I'm just going to halfway this, right? Like, I'm just not going to put it because it's really nothing, versus like, I'm going to make the best that I possibly can with this. I think of like having an old car, and you're like, some people are like, oh, it's just all a piece of junk. And I'm like, well, no, we're going to take care of that piece of junk that you think is. It gets you to and from. So let's clean up the wheels. Let's clean up what we can. Let's keep it tidy on the inside. Let's take care of what we have. And that allows you to get to a better car, a better opportunity, because of people see that character in someone and they realize the opportunity too.
Yeah.
You know.
And I always think about the picture of the dad and his daughter, and he says, take that Lamborghini, which is all dirty, dusty in the garage and full of dirt, and take it down to the guy on the corner and ask him how much it is. The guy's like, it's $1,000. Take it to the used car salesman and tell you how much it is. It's $20,000. Take it down to the antique collector that knows that that's a one edition, single print, only car that's ever been done. He's like, it's worth unlimited. It's worth $1 million. And I think art, right? Our career, you bring something to the table, and then all of a sudden when somebody that God's been waiting for you to meet sees that, and it's like, oh, you're worth. And it's just one of those moments where, we believe and we have faith and we persevere and we don't give up. And then there's the moment, that you're able to bring your gift and your value to the table at the highest level. And I think that's the journey of, your life is constantly that. But then there's the people that devalue you, right? We were talking last night, and just cut you down, and the people that come against you. But that didn't deter you. That didn't stop you. That didn't change your path. You actually said, okay, well, I'm going to keep going, and now God's going to give me a new path, and I think that's a huge testament to, your faithfulness in a career in the industry is to never give up, to not quit, and to always put your first foot forward, and your best foot forward, So, man, there's no conventional way to get here, and there's no conventional way to stay here other than hard work, perseverance, and don't give up.
Sure.
Yep. And, I just love the fact that you want to make the world a brighter, better place. And that's, what, it gives me chills. It's just so who and what I believe myself in being in this industry and having a studio and this show, and hoping that, those that are watching are inspired to make the world a better place. I think that we have enough things in the world that make it not a good place. But that the confidence in each of us with the gifts and the talents that we've all been given is like, how can I use this goodness in me to make the world a little brighter?
Yeah.
And I love that about your career. If it's behind a backseat in a fighter jet, if it's whatever opportunity you're given, you look at it as an opportunity to produce something excellent, to provide it to be a better place, a brighter, better place, even if it's the way that you treat the people that you work with or the environment that you are in, that you bring that goodness to that. I think we all have that ability to do that. It's just what we choose in our life. And I just applaud you. I can hear it through your whole story. I just applaud you for doing that everywhere you've gone, even into the corporate world, to the military world, to the creative land, to the church world. I mean, you've just been in many different circumstances, many different environments. And that's another debunked belief, I think, is we think, oh, well, if we all worked at Disney, then I'll be a great animator.
Right.
Well, every industry, every company has its own, issues and struggles, but just start with you, starting with the way you approach everything that you do. And I think that puts you further and further ahead in the world. We're all here for like a blip. They say, on your tombstone, the dash, right? We're all here for a dash. And what are you going to do with the dash of your life? And your dash has looked really cool.
Thank you.
And I applaud you for really doing well with the dash that you've been given to make this world a better place.
So how can people get a hold of you to be a part of their project, or, talk to you and consult with you, or whatever it is?
Follow you. Be inspired by what all you're
just
doing.
All the things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working so closely now with Brainy Pixel, and that's pretty much, a good partnership that I'm doing. So even though I have my own company, that would be the best way is go to brainypixel.com, and check out what they're doing there and reach out to Brandon if you have any questions. And then through that, well, he'll bring me in and we can, see what God has. But yeah, it's God's timing with everything. I think about just like you mentioned, working at Disney and just all the things that they're doing now and just the environment for kids content.
Yep.
It's like God knew exactly when I needed to make that transition to be prepared for this, streaming wars is what they're calling it.
Yep.
And so being able to fight against that content and create content that families feel confident in, we are in the best time ever to create that, because people are realizing how important it is. And that's what we're doing at Brainy Pixel and Owlegories and these other places that we're working.
Wow.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. Well, we'll put all your everything to contact you and how to follow you. And, if you have footage, we'll overlay of certain things that you've done. So our audience can follow you and go throw some support his way and be inspired by what you're doing, and reach out if you have questions. Super cool guy. He's great to answer back to you and stuff like that. So thanks. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for sharing your story and letting us into your world a little bit. It's been a delight. It's been fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Always is.
It's the first time for me, so this has been,
Hey,
been
you
good,
do great on this side. I'm just telling you.
Well, it's actually funny. When I was in the communications world, we actually started a internal TV station, and because of my job, I would actually had to be a quote unquote news anchor. So I'd go to a military base and actually, talk to the camera. Hi, this is Layne Laughter with Aero TV. We're out at Nellis Air Force Base. And
See, look right there.
There it goes.
You got your own podcast show right now. Laughter with Laughter. Here you go. Always on set. That's amazing.
Don't give Brandon any ideas. He's going to
Don't-
watch
Oh,
this.
no.
Oh no! Well, you'll have animes created next to you. You'll be talking to a whole animation set. It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, no, thank you
Yeah.
guys.
Jake, thanks again for being another great co-host.
Yeah,
It's
glad to
always
be here.
fun.
Well, I mean, do we really want to give him that?
Okay, do we take it back?
Yeah, let's
Maybe we
go
should take that
ahead.
back.
Rewind. Nah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's been fun and it's been real, but it's time to close today. So until next time on Set Life.